Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, June 15th, 2023. It is 9:36 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. Joining us via Zoom is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder. Today, we're having a presentation, informational session on the Offut Lake LMD vote briefing. And Jennifer, will you be doing the introduction to this, or are you passing it straight to Tim?
I'm passing it straight to Tim.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Tim Wilson, Water Resources Manager with Public Works. Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. And just some background, going to be talking to you today about the results of the vote for the Offut Lake Management District. Thank you. The board passed a resolution in April adopting a resolution that put that vote to the community. So how do I progress this?
Maybe slow.
Roll down. Use the wheel.
Very good, thank you. So topics today, just a quick overview of the lake management districts and the proposed Offut Lake Management District petition. Overview of the Lake Management District formation process. Then we'll go into a summary of the community vote, and we'll talk about the next steps in the LMD formation process. So a reminder, Lake Management District forms a county administered program. The county staff serve as the program administrators and subject matter experts. The county assumes liability of approved activities. The county manages all permits, and the programs themselves are subject to all applicable county policies, such as our integrated pest management, financial procurement, all of those policies. So the Offut Lake petition, you may recall, when this was submitted to the county, they talk about, per statute, they talk about their very high level goals of what they would like to work on and what they would like to achieve by forming the LMD. For this community, their goals were to maintain a healthy and ecological balance of humans and wildlife in the lake, to ensure safety of boaters and swimmers, to employ best practice techniques to ensure environmental safety and preservation. They also want to contract with an environmental consultant company to conduct an integrated aquatic vegetation management plan, or IVAMP, to assess the condition of Offut Lake, water quality, identify aquatic plants and noxious species. They want to control nuisance levels of aquatic vegetation, noxious weeds, and non-native aquatic plants in accordance with an IVAMP, as well as prescriptions developed in compliance with the county's IPM policy, and create a plan for best management practices. They would like to reduce toxic algae blooms and rapidly increasing weed growth, conduct regular water quality testing to identify lake nutrients and possible pollution sources. They would like to educate and inform the OLMD members, ratepayers, on lake water quality and management issues, including toxic algae blooms, nutrient levels, boating safety, via e-newsletters and regular OLMD advisory committee meetings. So I think the board's pretty well versed in this at this point, but I wanted to touch on the formation process and key decision points for the board. Following the receipt of the petition and verification by the staff that the petition meets the statutory requirements, there are typically 8 board actions required for formation of an LMD. The first is the consideration of the resolution of intention. That is where the board considers the petition itself and the goals of the petition. The board then set a public hearing, held a public hearing. The resolution that you adopted, passed in April, authorized that vote of affected owners. So here we are, we're in between steps 4 and steps 5, talking about that vote. Next steps would be to consider an ordinance establishing the LMD. But that is not the end of it. After the ordinance is passed, or if it is passed, the board would be asked to set a public hearing and hold a public hearing regarding that role of assessment. So given the community a chance to come in and air any grievances, I guess, regarding their individual rates if they feel like they are a mistake. So we're going to talk about the results of the community vote. So very consistent with what we've seen in the last 10 years for the other LMDs when these have gone to a vote. We have a 58.9% return rate of the ballots that were sent out. There are 224 parcels that are included within the boundaries of the Offut Lake community. So we saw 132 of those return. And just a reminder that by statute, this is not just a simple vote of the community. This is a weighted vote, that the votes are tied to the value of their annual charges that are proposed to be paid by the individual ratepayers. So the results are a little bit unique in that we actually had more no votes than yes votes by voter for this one. 68 no votes for about 51.5%, 64 yes votes. However, when we moved to the weighted vote, the vote passed. So we are with a weighted total, we have a weighted total of 29,432 votes and 23,732 no votes by weight. Okay, so per statute, per 3661-100, if the proposal receives a simple weighted majority in favor of creating the district, the board per statute shall adopt an ordinance creating the Lake Management District and may proceed with establishing the rates and charges for the district.
Shall sounds like we gotta do it.
I'm not a lawyer, but that's what the statute says.
So the board doesn't have an option to say no.
2 decision points prior to the vote. So at this point, again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what I don't know what the options
The
are.
initial resolution was a resolution of intent to create, or actually?
The board passed a resolution of intent initially, and that is accepting the petition and deciding to move on. The resolution of findings and determinations was the one that was passed in April. That is the board saying that they find the proposed district in the public interest, financially feasible, and authorizing the vote. So the next steps in the process, unless we're directed otherwise, staff will submit an AIS putting forward a draft ordinance for board consideration. If the ordinance is adopted, several steps remain in the process. As mentioned before, we would ask you to set a public hearing regarding the role of assessment or the rates and charges for that district. And then we would ask you to consider a resolution adopting, rejecting, or revising that role of assessment. So should the LMD be formed, annual rates and charges are added to annual property tax statements that would begin in 2024. If the community chooses, county staff will establish a steering committee to provide input. Short and long-term work plans are developed collaboratively with county staff and the community, and an integrated aquatic vegetation management plan is developed. With that, I would answer any questions the board may have.
Can you stop sharing the screen?
Yes.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, on page 10, available board options, number 2 there says may proceed with establishing the rates and charges. And then what does that really mean? Are we going to, is this an option that we can raise or change? What does that really cover, I guess?
As I understand the process, Commissioner, for the board to modify the rates and charges at this point, you would have to back up several steps and reinitiate the public process in order to do that. I think what the statute is talking about at this point is that the county needs to document the role of assessment, which has already been done. It's just a list of individual rates and charges to each particular parcel that would then be, that would then go through a public process to identify any mistakes, and then for the board to consider adopting that role or correcting if a ratepayer came in and was being charged a lakefront rate and they were actually upland owner, to authorize those corrections. Or the board could reject it and take those steps back and go through the public process again. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Munster?
What authority, the county works in partnership, is that with the LMD? What actual authority do we have with respect to the work plan or the IVAMP? Like hypothetically, let's say the LMD is doing a certain plan and then best available science, shifts, and there's like a new data that's a bad product or there's a better strategy, and the Lake Management District wants to keep doing what it's doing. And can we step in and say, no, this is not best BMP anymore? How would that work theoretically?
I can speak to my understanding of the statute, and I can speak to previous legal opinions on this that seem clear to me that this is a county program. So while we work collaboratively with the communities and try to carry out the initiatives that the community would like to see, it is the county's program. So to answer your question, if something was out of alignment or was a different course than the county wanted to go, we have full authority to make those adjustments.
All right, just curious. That's all I got.
My question is in regards, you mentioned that it was a little bit different, and I kind of want to ask the historical context on the results of the ballots return versus the weighted votes, right? And so is it different in where in the past it's been kind of, the results have been similar, or?
I'm gonna go from memory here, so bear with me. I'm going back to the 2015 Long vote, the 2016 Lawrence vote, and the most recent Pattison vote. All of those have been, there's been a majority that have voted yes, just on a parcel by parcel basis. So this is unique in that there were actually more taxpayers or ratepayers that voted no on this. So it's unique in that regard. The rate of return is very consistent with what we've seen. These don't typically generate a 70 or 80% return. They're usually you know, when you're considering the vote, it's usually 55-ish% of the ballots are returned for these. So to answer your question, the change is just this, you know, down the line is a no vote if it was not a weighted vote.
And so, for me, I would like to get an attorney's opinion on that shall. Because I wanna know, does the board have flexibility?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I just quoted the statute itself and I would recommend.
Okay, Andrew?
Do you remember the Summit Lake vote that was also by parcel was no?
On a special
Vote.
district.
Yeah, and then even the weighted vote resulted in no. So this seems to be different and unusual.
Yeah,
You know, by parcel, individuals is a no vote. And then the individuals who have the waterfront perhaps have much better weighted.
and I do have information on how that's split, and you're exactly right. It's not as well, the lakefront properties were 61% yes, 39% no. And then the upland properties, the return balance were almost the opposite of that. So the upland yeses were 38%, the upland no's were 62%.
The upland, I know we've done different ones, but I think they all have a schedule where the upland folks pay quite a bit less, even though they're, you know.
Yeah, yes, great.
They're part of it and they have to pay, but it's not the same rate as the lakefront, is that right?
That's correct. The lakefront developed parcels for Offut are $750 annually. Lakefront parcels that are undeveloped are $375 annually. When you move to upland parcels, it's $70 for those upland parcels. There's also a habitat reserve classification, which, you know, a minority of these fall into, but those are $94.
And then, can you remind me the weighting, is it by acreage or assessed value or?
It's by these proposed rates. So
Okay,
so a lakefront owner,
whoever made you pay.
you have a house on the front, you get 750 votes. If you're an upland owner, you get 70 votes.
Okay, so there's an incentive to, I mean, I'm not saying anything, you know, but I'm just thinking out loud. I think we talked about this before. There's kind of incentive to not have the upland folks pay too much, because then it can prejudice the vote. If there is that split, which we clearly see there is in this community, between support among, even at $70, the upland folks were opposing it 62%.
Yeah, and not to say that this happened in this case, but it can be very strategic in
Right,
how you
right.
draw the
Yeah,
boundaries.
that's all I was saying, is there is a element of thought there.
Yeah.
It could go into it. Interesting.
So we'll be following up with then legal counsel to get an opinion about the next steps for.
Would you like us to do that, or is that a board?
Go ahead and follow up with that.
Okay.
And hopefully we can get that ready when you bring the AIS for the next steps. So at that point, board will have the option to have a conversation before they consider taking action on the next steps.
And may I ask the question that we're asking legal to look at the statute as it relates to following the vote. These are the board options, and specifically the language that is here.
Because the next option I believe the board has is ordinance to create it.
Correct.
So is that the next step the board shall or?
You're asking
Other
for an
options.
interpretation of the
Yes.
RCW and that specific, I just read through it again in that specific language. Cause it's a long sentence. And so we just pulled a portion of that sentence and you're asking for a legal opinion on.
Got it.
Yeah, shall usually means you can't, but when it's the longer context and we're only seeing one little phrase, it's worth asking the attorney for the full.
I did find it interesting that the language was structured so that the ordinance, the board shall adopt an ordinance, but then may proceed with establishing the rates and charges.
Right, that's a little squirrely.
Carry.
Commissioner Edwards? Anything else before we adjourn?
No, I think you guys have asked my questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, so it is 9:56. We are adjourned.
Just like